Okay, I think we're going to get started. Thank you for coming, and welcome to Bridget's talk today on the Marine Mammal Project that we started last year. It's really interesting, and if you are confused, yes, we flip-flopped the schedule of the presentations for this month and next month. So next month we'll talk about Shoreline Sanctuary and our green initiatives at the zoo. So Bridget initiated this grant last year and was able to go visit the Marine Mammal Center, and she's going to kind of tell us about our grant program as well as our sea lions, because we have some pretty special sea lions here that not everyone knows all about. So I think she's going to give us a little taste of both. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Stacia. As she said, my name is Bridget Cronin, and I am on the shows team here at the Kansas City Zoo. And I'm going to be talking about my grant project as well as the trip that I was able to take. So a little bit about the Marine Mammal Center. It is actually located in Sausalito, California, which is just north of San Francisco in a place called the Marin Headlands, which is really beautiful parklands. And the center was founded in 1975 and has been in operation since then. The center has a three-pronged mission to advance global ocean conservation through marine mammal rescue and rehabilitation, scientific research, and education efforts. They're open to the public every day, and they're free to visit. They offer docent-led tours for a small fee. Most of the work that they do there is done on public display. So people are able to see them do necropsies, fish prep, and daily care of their animals each and every day. They engage an average of 100,000 people per year and do about 40,000 formal programs for school children. So they have a pretty broad outreach. The Marine Mammal Center is one of the largest marine mammal hospitals in the world, and they take in stranded animals from over 600 miles of California coastline. So that lighter blue area is their operation area, where they have permits to go out and assess and bring in stranded animals in need of help. They average about 600 to 800 patients per year and have treated over 20,000 animals since they first opened in 1975. And that includes over 21 different species that they have treated. They also have 4 satellite locations in addition to their main hospital. So you can see those stars along the map. Those are temporary intake sites that they can bring in patients from wider areas of the range, get them stabilized before transporting them to the main hospital for extended treatment. So as Stacia mentioned, part of why the Kansas City Zoo got involved with this particular project is that we are home to 4 rescued sea lions, California sea lions, who actually 3 of whom came from the Marine Mammal Center and did spend some time there when they first stranded. And I know some of you know their stories, but many of you don't. So I'm going to take a minute and talk about some of our ladies. So pictured on the top, we have Sunshine and Delilah. And below that is Luna and Pepper, and those are our 4 rescued girls. So this is Sunshine and Delilah. These 2 sea lions both stranded at an extremely young age, and they were suspected to have domoic acid toxicity. So that is the result of a red tide, where neurotoxins actually can build up in the system and can cause seizure activity in the brain. It's likely that they developed this while they were still in utero, because both sea lions stranded too young to have eaten fish on their own out in the wild. It can be a very serious disease, especially in a young animal like that. And Sunshine has exhibited seizure activity since she came here to the zoo. And our amazing vet team has worked with her over the years to get her on a medication treatment plan that keeps that seizure activity stabilized and keeps her relatively healthy. Delilah was less severely affected, but does still have significant medical complications. You'll see both of them in the pool, and you'll notice they have some stunted growth, and they did have some very serious medical issues as young pups. So as they continue to grow, We don't know too much about how this disease will affect them as adults because we don't commonly have the opportunity to observe pups with domoic acid toxicity living as long as ours have, and living in our care like this. So we're not quite sure exactly what the future holds for them, but they knew that they needed a lot of medical attention, and our vet staff was able to provide that to help keep them healthy. These are our other two ladies. They're a little bit younger. This is Luna and Pepper. These guys were actually repeat stranders. And what that means is that they stranded as young pups who were malnourished. They were very thin and had some health complications as a result of that malnutrition. The center was able to get them healthy again, treat them, get them to put on weight, and release them back into the wild. Now, usually that is enough of a jump start to get these animals to thrive again on their own. But these two couldn't quite figure it out, and for whatever reason, they did end up stranding again some number of months later in poor body condition again. Now, what that told us is that these two weren't able to thrive and survive on their own. They weren't able to be finding the food they needed to be getting and taking care of themselves. So they needed to find a forever home as well. And they are relatively healthy today, but they would not have had much opportunity out in the wild. So those are our four ladies. And that is part of why this project is near and dear to my heart, but also to us here at the zoo, because we are home to animals who have been through this journey, and we're telling that story to our guests as well. Now, California sea lions make up a large percentage of the patients who come through the Marine Mammal Center, but they have treated over 21 different species, including some of the ones pictured here. That includes northern fur seals, Guadalupe fur seals, sea otters, harbor seals, elephant seals, and the cute guy in the bottom corner is a Steller sea lion. So while California sea lions are not listed as endangered, some of these species are. And one of the advantages that the Marine Mammal Center has with this large population of California sea lions coming in for treatment is that they have a large data pool, so they can get a better idea of what the issues going on in the ocean are. What type of treatments can they develop to help these animals to survive and thrive? And then they can use those techniques and information on more critical species and help develop better plans of action to help those species that really are in big trouble. So the Kansas City Zoo's involvement began last year, as Stacia mentioned. The first year, the grant actually supported the purchase of a minus 80-degree freezer, which is a really important purchase for the center. As I mentioned, a big part of their work is research, and this freezer allows them to store medical samples, tissue samples, blood samples, and things like that that they would use for future research projects and data collection. Currently, the center has about 20 freezers of this size, so that gives you a scope of the amount of sampling and data that we're talking about. And this freezer, as of last check-in with the center, holds over 23,000 samples already that are related to a study they're doing on cancer. So that is very prevalent in the California sea lion population. About 20% of the adults who die in treatment at the center are affected with a particular type of urogenital cancer. So this is a really interesting and ongoing study that has wider implications for other species, ourselves included, if we can get to the bottom of what is going on with this type of cancer that they're developing. And as I mentioned, the center is involved in a lot of research projects, so this was really integral to the work that they need to do to be able to house and have that data resource for anyone who needs it and needs to access it. In the second year of the grant, we were actually able to come in at a really critical moment. We had looked at a variety of options for funding for this coming year when, unfortunately, the Marine Mammal Center suffered the catastrophic failure of one of their life support pumps. For any of us who work in our aquatic areas here at the zoo, We know that the life support systems and filtration systems that keep those pools up and running are critical to the health and well-being of our animals. They help keep the water moving and sanitized and clean, which is especially important for a hospital housing very sick animals. The center does run a redundant system, which means that there are 2 pumps and they have backups in case something fails, as it did in this case. But it can take 6 to 8 weeks to get a new pump ordered and online. So this was a really critical and expensive need for them to get this pump replaced as soon as possible. So the fact that we had this partnership in place and we were already looking at funding options was perfect timing, because we were really able to swoop in and help them out with this critical purchase that they needed. And they're very, very grateful for that contribution that we were able to make. So during my visit to the center, I was able to go for about 10 days and work with their animal care team, their vet team, and their rescue team. And I got a chance to see the full journey that a patient takes from the center, from the moment they're first identified to the day that they hopefully get to go back into the ocean. I got to see a wide range of diseases that they were treating, some of which we have seen or could potentially see in our sea lions here at the zoo. I got to assist with treatment, restraining, tube feeding, and learn a lot of really valuable, critical care skills that are difficult to learn outside of a true emergency. And one thing that is very interesting, I think you should know, is that this organization is largely volunteer-driven. So you're going to see a lot of people in photos. 90% of those individuals are volunteers. They help with everything from daily animal care, restraint, administering certain medications, to being the ones who go out and assess stranded animals and determine if someone needs to come and intake that patient. So keep that in mind while you're watching through this presentation. So the very first thing that happens is a phone call. Every patient begins with a phone call. The public is a really important part in helping the Marine Mammal Center get connected with animals in need. They have a rescue call line where people can call in about animals they're concerned about. They'll be asked questions like, where's the animal located? What behavior is it exhibiting? What's the physical condition of the animal? And things like that that help give a sense of what might be going on and if that animal is truly an animal in need. They also have a network of fishermen who help them to track animals who may be entangled or in trouble out in the ocean but haven't yet come onto land. That helps them keep track, especially of larger animals moving through the water. Once they identify an animal who may need assistance, they have a team of volunteers who live up and down the coastline who will go out and assess the animal. We'll get eyes on them, see what's going on, and determine if a team needs to come out and collect them. If they are going to bring in an animal, they use a variety of specialized tools, like these pictured here, to safely get that animal into a crate for transportation. So that large board has 2 main purposes. First, it is a physical barrier between us and the animal to help keep us safe from wild animals with very sharp teeth. But it also acts to help hide the human form. And especially with young animals, it's very important to prevent imprinting, where the animal believes that they are a person or we are sea lions. And they also use crates and nets and bite gloves and things like that to transport the animal. From there, the animal is going to be transported to one of the holding locations or the main hospital. And just like here at the zoo, that animal will go through a quarantine period before they are introduced to the rest of the population. One of the very first things that happens, and one of my favorite things to get to see, was an intake exam. Every single patient who arrives at the Marine Mammal Center gets a full exam. That includes a full body physical, blood draw, ultrasound, nasal swabs, and they receive a flipper tag for identification. And that is performed by vet staff. Now, once they gather all of that diagnostic information, they'll make a tentative diagnosis and a treatment plan. Then they'll place them in one of the pens based on their size, behavior, and potential contagion with other animals in the main hospital. This is an overview of the main hospital pens. There are about 20 pens, and this is where most of the animals would be housed. Not shown is a separate seal hospital. It's a little bit quieter and less trafficked because those animals are more sensitive. And they also do have a separate surgical suite and quarantine area off to the side that you can't quite see. During my time there were about 70 patients on site. The majority were California sea lions. But when this place fills up, they can fit a couple hundred sea lions in here if need be. Once an animal is moved into the main pens, daily care is handed over to the animal care teams. These are teams of highly dedicated and highly trained volunteers who come in every day, all day, to work with these animals. The very first thing they do is go out and get a visual check on every single animal, make sure everyone is still alive and well, and that they report any critical issues to the vet staff right away. The next thing is heading into the fish kitchen to prep diets for the day. Every single animal gets a very specific diet prescribed to them by the veterinarians, and it has to be sorted for quality, weighed out, and then they'll prep medications and pill them into the gills of the fish. It's the easiest and most efficient way to get a sea lion to take their medication is to slip it into their food. So each animal has to get that prepped specially just for them. Whenever possible, volunteers would do what's called a dump feeding. So they go out, go into the pen, and they'll dump the food into the water, step outside of the pen, and quietly watch to see which animals are eating, how much is everybody eating. The idea is to impose upon those animals as little as possible. The goal is to be invisible if you can. But if animals are on medications, or if they're not eating equally with their pen mates, they do have special tools to be able to separate them and ensure that each animal gets their designated medication and their share of the food. So here you can see them using a net to remove one of the better eating sea lions out of the pool so that his pen mates can eat in peace. For those patients who are too sick to be eating on their own or who are too young to be eating fish, we would tube feed. So this is actually a fish slurry inside that syringe there. It's made in an industrial blender. We can mix in added hydration or medication depending on the animal's needs. And the team of at least 3 people will go in. One person will use a towel to restrain the head and flippers of the animal. One person will keep an eye on any other animals who might be in the pool and protect the feeders from any animals who might be curious about what's going on. And the third will actually do the feeding. And the first thing you do is take that long, flexible tube, and you'll measure an estimate of how long into the animal's stomach. And very carefully, we'll insert it down their esophagus and into their stomach. Both the feeder and the restrainer then listen for stomach sounds to be sure that tube is placed correctly. The last thing you want to do is pump fish slurry into somebody's lungs. So it's really important everyone involved is confident that tube is placed correctly, and then you'll go ahead and do the feeding. This is something I got to have a lot of practice with when I was there. There were a number of pups, and it's one of those skills you can really only learn by doing, and these are the best people to teach you. So it was a really good experience for me. I got to practice with patients of all sizes and strengths, some who were very down and out, and some who were just about ready to eat and not quite figured it out yet. So once the feeds were done for the morning, which took a couple of hours, the cleaning would begin. Each pen had to be cleaned at least once a day, and we had to take special care for contagious areas. While I was there was an outbreak of leptospirosis, which is highly contagious and affects the kidney system. So we wanted to be sure we weren't spreading that disease around the hospital. So after you came out of every single pen, you scrub yourself head to toe, disinfect your pants, disinfect all of your tools before you move to the next set. This is also the prime opportunity for animal care volunteers to be observing the patients, checking on how they're behaving with their pen mates, and how their behavior and demeanor is overall. And those reports will go back to vet staff to help develop the treatment plan. They also tried to get a weight on animals every day. Those who were too sick to be crated or too large to be crated, the weighing would be skipped. But it was really helpful information to be able to track the progress of these patients through their time at the hospital. And every patient was weighed at least twice, once on intake and once prior to release. The last task of the morning was charting. Our vet team will know this is a very arduous responsibility, but all of the information, whether animals were eating, what meds they were on, how they were behaving during cleaning, needed to go into the charts so that the vet team could be updated and making changes to the treatment plan for each animal. Vets would then do rounds every day in the middle of the day to get eyes on all the patients, revise treatment plans, and evaluate for discharges. Make sure that they were getting ready to plan releases for those animals who were healthy enough to go back. Once that was done, the process began all over again with a midday crew. They would do midday meds, clean again, and then an evening crew would come in at 4 o'clock and actually start that all over again to work through the night, making sure animals had ample opportunities to eat and receive medications all night long. Now, the vet team there also does a lot of surgical procedures. Some animals came in with injuries that were a bit more intense or diseases that required surgical intervention. They had a full surgical suite, and while I was there, they were actually treating a number of shark bite patients who did require surgical intervention. I also got to observe an enucleation and actually removed an eyeball of one of the adult sea lions. Turns out that is a pretty common injury for sea lions who have domoic acid toxicity, like Sunshine and Delilah did, because during that seizure activity, there's a chance they're going to hit their head on something and potentially injure themselves while they're having an active seizure. Surgery for marine mammals can be extremely risky. They are conscious breathers, and so we have to be sure that while they are under, we are breathing for them. Unlike you and I, if we stop thinking about it, we're going to continue to breathe. Marine mammals have to think about every breath they're going to take. So that makes surgery much more dangerous for these animals. But at a center like this, where they have as high patient numbers as they do, they get a lot of practice. And they get quite good at it, and they've developed a number of techniques to help these animals survive. Throughout the process, we monitor their vitals, keep them warm, and try to prevent the marine mammal dive reflex from triggering, which would tell their brain that they're underwater and they should hold their breath for a prolonged period. One thing I found especially interesting is they put socks on their flippers to keep them warm. If you've ever seen a sea lion in socks, I have to tell you it's the cutest thing in the world. So in addition to the care of the rehabilitation animals that come in, research is a really big part of what they do here. They have a full pathology lab on site, and this is actually viewable from a public area. This is taken from the public pathway. And they have dozens and dozens of projects going on at once. While I was there, they were working on a histopathology study about cancer, a study of the hippocampus in domoic acid cases, a PK study on various drugs, one of them being prednisone, to see how long the drug is active in the body and what our correct dose should be. They were doing a bone marrow study. They were also looking at nasal mites. That was all in a 10-day span, projects that they were actively working on. They also had several others they were planning for, and some that I didn't get to see. Each patient who comes through the center contributes to these research efforts. Every single patient contributes at least 2 blood samples, 1 on intake and 1 prior to release, as well as any other samples that they might be able to get. During the intake and release exams, they'll gather as much as they can. If that animal's bleeding really well, they'll get extra blood samples for a variety of studies. If they're taking meds great, they may be put into a drug study. If they are restraining well, maybe we can get some nasal swabs for this other scientist who wants some information for us. So this team is really using their resources to their peak to get as much information from these animals as they can without imposing additional restraints, additional catch-ups on them. So they're trying to do all of this within the confines of their normal treatment plan. But because they do have so many animals coming through the center, the data set they have access to is massive. They have a range of ages of animals, health, disease, genders, ages, and years. So they're able to track all kinds of information and get all kinds of data that we would have no other way to gather. This is actually a board they keep in the middle of their break room. This is the running list of all of the projects that they have going on and that they're trying to schedule day to day. So every morning when vet staff and the care team come in, this is the first thing you see. And you can make a plan for what might I be able to collect along the way today. Over the years, they've contributed to about 40% of peer-reviewed journal articles in North America related to marine animals. So they're doing a ton of work. Unfortunately, some animals make it to the center too sick to make it through treatment. Or they have a disease that is life-threatening, like that cancer, which is considered deadly. So for those patients, a necropsy is done. This is done on every single animal who comes through the center and does not survive, as well as some cetaceans that are picked up already deceased off the beaches. These necropsies are really important to gaining additional information. The goal is to develop an idea of what the likely cause of stranding and death was, to collect samples for future study, and to gain knowledge to improve future care and conservation actions that we can take to help future patients and animals out in the wild. This is also done on display. So this picture is taken from a public pathway. I did not include the gory ones, but everything is on display. There are no secrets. While I was there, I actually got to observe 2 necropsies on patients whom I also did the intake exams with. It is really interesting to see how our diagnostic tools line up to what's really going on inside these patients. Both of those were cancer cases. And with the ultrasound, we were able to see that there was definitely a lot of cancerous masses in the abdomen. But when we opened up those patients, seeing what was actually going on inside of them, I'm surprised they were alive as long as they were. So this is a really good feedback tool for the vets and care staff as well, to see and revise how they're interpreting those diagnostics. As I mentioned, one of the issues we're seeing a lot is this urogenital cancer. It affects about 20% of the adult sea lions that die in treatment at the center. It is considered fatal, and they do euthanize animals who come in with it. One thing that is very interesting about this is that they're doing research on this right now, and they think there may be implications in how this cancer arises that might be related to cancer in humans as well. So hopefully if we can learn more about this particular type of cancer, that'll have implications for us as well. Many of the patients do recover, though, which is great news, and they're able to be released back into the wild. This is one of the larger size crates that would hold an adult sea lion for transport to a release site. They plan their release locations based on the age of the animal and the species, and make sure that they're releasing those animals into a place that is appropriate for them to get back into the water. So adults, they may take them to a closer beach that's a little bit more rocky or has larger waves. The pups will take somewhere a little more secluded, give them an easier trip back to the ocean. It can be a several-hour drive to get to the intended release location, and that's done mostly by teams of rescue volunteers. Occasionally, we'll have a sea lion get a little bit carsick, which is what happened on my release trip. Poor guy came out of the crate a little less than thrilled. But it's very moving to get to see these animals go back into the wild. And it puts all of this work, all of this effort into perspective of why we are doing this, both here at the zoo and at the Marine Mammal Center. So this is one lucky sea lion who got to make his trip back home. This is a sub-adult, probably a couple of years old, making his way back out. And you'll see all of the volunteers have those boards to help show him the way. He doesn't need that much help. He knows exactly what he's doing. The public is invited to come and see a lot of the releases. And it's a pretty exciting day for everyone who gets to be involved. Now, on their morning out, the animals who are scheduled for release aren't fed their breakfast. So a lot of times, right after they make their way through the waves, you'll get to see them feeding out in the water, porpoising around and looking for fish. So that is all I have for you guys today. But does anyone have any questions? Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, we put flipper tags on, but do they do any other kind of tracking? So the answer is sometimes. Every animal receives a flipper tag, and that has two purposes. It allows us to identify them when they're in the pens and ensure they're getting the right treatment. It also allows us to identify an individual should they be respotted out in the wild. That is what most patients go out with. But sometimes they do have tracking devices they can attach. A lot of them will go on the back and they'll be kind of glued onto the animal. They do that more for some of the endangered species that come through, that they want to gather more information about where these animals are going. So a lot of the sea otters that go out will get one. A lot of the Guadalupe fur seals, they may put them on. Those devices are obviously a lot more expensive than your standard plastic flipper tag. So they do try to pick and choose which patients are going to offer the most return on investment and the most helpful information when they are placing those devices. Yeah.
Did I hear you right in saying that 3 of our 4 rescues came directly from them? Where did the 4th one come from?
Yes. So she asked, 3 of the 4 rescue sea lions we have here came from the Marine Mammal Center. Our 4th one came from a different facility further south. She came in from a facility closer to LA, and she found her way to us that way.
Release multiple animals on one release event, or is that contraindicated in any way, or does it just case by case?
Yeah, the question was, when they do releases, will they release multiple animals at the same time? The answer is yes. They usually try to schedule releases with more than one animal. It does save on costs, being able to transport multiple animals at once, and staff needs as well. But it does depend on the situation. So they will schedule releases usually about a week or 2 out, and they'll plan which animals need to go to which locations, what animals might be most appropriate for certain locations. So animals like the fur seals tend to get released out into open water because that's a more appropriate environment for them and closer to their home range. They'll usually go out on their own because no one else needs to go there. But a lot of times, especially when they're releasing pups, they'll take them in large groups. They tend to go out to see better when they're following their friends. So yeah. Anyone else?
What's the capacity of the facility currently?
I'm not certain of a cap number, and I actually asked that question when I was there. They said the cap does vary a little bit. They tend to house somewhere over 100 animals at a time, but in push comes to shove years, they have found a lot of additional spaces to put animals. The way the pens are set up, they actually can gate off the hallways as well and create connecting pens or create smaller pens in the hallways. And in years of high capacity, they have had to do that. So it is a fairly flexible number.
Every day to weigh them, is that the only way to weigh them, or do they have full-size scales where they don't need to move animals as much?
Yeah, they only have, the question was when they're weighing the animals, is the only way to do that to crate them daily. They have built-in scales into their floors. We don't have movable scales for the purpose of weighing animals. Those animals who daily crating is unrealistic or going to be preventative to treatment and recovery, the weighing is skipped. So a number of animals who are too sick or too large, they won't do that. But they do try to get as many weights as they can on those animals who are up and moving around and can be crated fairly easily. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Bridget. The Marine Mammal Center has been great to work with. They've been great with Bridget, and they've been great to work with as a facility as a whole. And I think Bridget mentioned this a little bit, but one thing is it gets our staff obviously prepared to take care of our girls here, but with us sending different staff members out as we continue with this program, we can also assist when she was talking about the high intake times. They can call on us because we have staff that's been introduced to their facility and is aware of how they work. So we hope that it doesn't happen, but if they ever need assistance, they we're on the list that they can call us, and we can hopefully send some people out to help. So yeah, thank you so much, and thank you so much for coming, and we will see you next month.